Welcome to this audio adaptation of Thomas Hardy's classic novel, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Before we dive into the story itself, let's set the stage with some context about the author and the world he lived in. Thomas Hardy was born on June 2, 1840, in a rural part of southwestern England called Dorset. This region would become the main focus of his fiction. His father was a builder, and at 16, Hardy became an apprentice to an architect in the city of Dorchester. Later, he would use this city as the model for his fictional town of Casterbridge. Hardy seriously considered attending university and joining the church, a personal struggle he later dramatized in his novel, Jude the Obscure. However, his declining religious faith and a lack of money led him to pursue a career in writing instead. For nearly a dozen years, he worked in obscurity, producing novels and poetry that didn't find much success. His breakthrough came in 1874 with the novel Far from the Madding Crowd, which was his first critical and financial success. Finally able to support himself as a writer, he married Emma Lavinia Gifford later that same year. Although he built a strong reputation as a novelist, Hardy always saw himself first and foremost as a poet. For him, writing novels was primarily a way to earn a living. Like many writers of his time, he first published his novels in periodic installments in magazines. This method of publishing influenced his work. To keep readers buying the next issue, writers often ended each installment with a kind of cliffhanger. This is one reason why many Victorian novels have such convoluted and sometimes incredible plots. But it's not quite right to label Hardy as just a Victorian novelist. Nor can he be simply categorized as a modernist, like Virginia Woolf or D.H. Lawrence, who were determined to break the conventions of 19th-century literature. In many ways, Hardy was caught in the middle, between the 19th and 20th centuries, between Victorian and modern sensibilities, and between tradition and innovation. Soon after Tess of the D'Urbervilles was published in 1891, its sales secured Hardy's financial future. But the novel also stirred up a great deal of controversy. In this book and others, Hardy showed his deep moral sympathy for England's lower classes, especially for rural women. He became famous for his compassionate and often controversial portrayals of young women who were victimized by the rigid and self-righteous social morality of England. Tess of the D'Urbervilles is perhaps his most famous depiction of such a young woman. This novel, along with the one that followed it, Jude the Obscure, created a widespread public scandal because of their comparatively frank look at the sexual hypocrisy of English society. Hardy lived and wrote during a time of difficult social change. England was making a slow and painful transition from an old-fashioned agricultural nation to a modern industrial one. Businessmen and entrepreneurs representing new money were joining the ranks of the social elite. At the same time, some families of the ancient aristocracy, or old money, were fading into obscurity. Tess's family in the novel illustrates this change perfectly. Her parents, the D'Urbervilles, lose themselves in the fantasy of belonging to an ancient and aristocratic family, the D'Urbervilles. Hardy's novel strongly suggests that such a family history is not only meaningless, but also completely undesirable. These views were appalling to conservative and status-conscious British readers, and the book was met with widespread controversy in England. Frustrated by the scandal his work caused, Hardy eventually abandoned writing novels altogether after Jude the Obscure. He spent the rest of his career writing poetry. Though he is remembered more for his novels today, he was an acclaimed poet in his time. He died in 1928 and was buried in the prestigious Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. Now let's get an overview of the story we are about to begin. The story starts with a poor peddler named John Durbeyfield, who is stunned to learn he is a descendant of an ancient noble family, the D'Urbervilles. Meanwhile, his eldest daughter, Tess, is at the village May Day dance, where she briefly exchanges glances with a young man. Mr. and Mrs. Durbeyfield decide to send Tess to the D'Urberville mansion, hoping that Mrs. D'Urberville will make Tess's fortune. In reality, this Mrs. D'Urberville is no relation to Tess at all. Her husband, a merchant named Simon Stokes, simply changed his name to D'Urberville after he retired. Tess, however, doesn't know this. At the mansion, she meets the lascivious Alec d'Urberville, Mrs. d'Urberville's son. He gets Tess a job tending fowls on the estate. Tess feels she has no choice but to accept, because she blames herself for an accident that killed the family's horse, their only means of income. Tess spends several months at this job, resisting Alec's attempts to seduce her. But one night, after a fair, Alec takes advantage of her in the woods. Tess knows she does not love him. She returns home to her family and gives birth to Alec's child, whom she names Sorrow. The baby dies soon after he is born. Tess spends a miserable year at home before deciding to look for work elsewhere. She finally accepts a job as a milkmaid at the Talbothays dairy. At Talbothays, Tess enjoys a period of happiness. She befriends 3 fellow milkmaids named Iz, Reddy, and Marion. She also meets a man named Angel Clare, who turns out to be the same young man from the May Day dance. Tess and Angel slowly fall in love. They grow closer, and she eventually accepts his proposal of marriage. However, she is troubled by her conscience and feels she must tell Angel about her past. She writes him a confessional note and slips it under his door, but it slides under the carpet, and Angel never sees it. After their wedding, both Angel and Tess confess their past indiscretions. Angel tells Tess about an affair he had with an older woman in London, and Tess tells Angel about her history with Alec. Tess forgives Angel, but Angel cannot forgive Tess. He gives her some money and boards a ship to Brazil, where he thinks he might start a farm. He tells Tess he will try to accept her past, but warns her not to try to join him until he comes for her. Tess struggles greatly. She has a difficult time finding work and is forced to take a job at an unpleasant farm. She tries to visit Angel's family, but overhears his brothers discussing Angel's poor marriage, so she leaves. Later, she hears a wandering preacher and is stunned to discover that it is Alec d'Urberville, who claims to have been converted to Christianity by Angel's father, the Reverend Clare. Their encounter shakes both of them, and Alec appallingly begs Tess never to tempt him again. Soon after, however, he abandons his religious ways and once again begs Tess to marry him. Tess learns from her sister Liza Lou that their mother is near death, and she is forced to return home to care for her. Her mother recovers, but her father unexpectedly dies soon after. When the family is evicted from their home, Alec offers to help. Tess refuses, knowing he only wants to make her feel obligated to him again. Finally, Angel decides to forgive his wife. He leaves Brazil, desperate to find her. He finds her mother, who tells him Tess has gone to a village called Sanborn. There, he finds Tess in an expensive boarding house called the Herons. He tells her he has forgiven her and begs her to take him back. But Tess tells him he has come too late. She explains that she was unable to resist Alec d'Urberville and went back to him. Angel leaves in a daze. Heartbroken to the point of madness, Tess goes upstairs and stabs her lover to death. When the landlady finds Alec's body, she raises an alarm, but Tess has already fled to find Angel. Angel agrees to help Tess, though he can't quite believe she has actually murdered Alec. They hide in an empty mansion for a few days, then travel farther. When they come to Stonehenge, Tess falls asleep. The next morning, a search party discovers them. Tess is arrested and sent to jail. The story ends with Angel and Liza Lou watching as a black flag is raised over the prison, signaling Tess's execution. Now, let's meet the characters who will bring this story to life. First, there is Tess Durbeyfield, the novel's protagonist. Tess is a beautiful and loyal young woman living with her impoverished family in the village of Marlott. She has a keen sense of responsibility and is committed to doing the best she can for her family. However, her inexperience and lack of wise parenting leave her extremely vulnerable. Her life becomes complicated when her father discovers a link to the noble d'Urberville family, which leads to Tess being sent to work at the d'Urberville mansion. Unfortunately, her ideals cannot protect her from misfortune after she becomes pregnant by Alec d'Urberville. The terrible irony is that Tess and her family are not really related to this branch of the d'Urbervilles at all. Next is Angel Clare. He is an intelligent young man who has decided to become a farmer to preserve his intellectual freedom from the pressures of city life. Angel's father and his 2 brothers are respected clergymen, but Angel's own religious doubts have kept him from joining the ministry. He meets Tess when she is a milkmaid at the Talbothays dairy and quickly falls in love with her. Then we have Alec d'Urberville. He is the handsome, immoral son of a wealthy merchant named Simon Stokes. Alec is not really a d'Urberville. His father simply took on the name of the ancient noble family after he built his mansion and retired. Alec is a manipulative and sinister young man who does everything he can to seduce the inexperienced Tess when she comes to work for his family. When he finally has his way with her in the woods, he later tries to help her, but he is unable to make her love him. Tess's father is Mr. John Durbeyfield, a lazy peddler in Marlett. John is naturally quick-witted, but he hates work. When he learns that he descends from the noble line of the d'Urbervilles, he is quick to try to profit from the connection. His wife is Mrs. Joan Durbeyfield, Tess's mother. Joan has a strong sense of propriety and very particular hopes for Tess's life. She is continually disappointed and hurt by the way her daughter's life unfolds. But she is also somewhat simple-minded and naturally forgiving. She finds herself unable to remain angry with Tess, particularly once Tess becomes her primary means of support. Alec's mother is Mrs. d'Urberville, the widow of Simon Stokes. Mrs. d'Urberville is blind and often ill. She cares deeply for her animals, but not for her maid, her son Alec, or Tess. In fact, she never sees Tess as anything more than an impoverished girl. At the Talbothays dairy, Tess befriends 3 milkmaids, Marion, Is Hewitt, and Reddy Priddle. They remain close to Tess throughout her life. All 3 are in love with Angel and are devastated when he chooses Tess. Marion turns to drink, Reddy attempts suicide, and Is nearly runs off to Brazil with Angel when he leaves Tess. Nevertheless, they remain helpful to Tess, writing a letter to Angel encouraging him to give her another chance. Angel's father is Reverend Clare, a somewhat stubborn but principled clergyman in the town of Emminster. He considers it his duty to convert the populace, and one of his most difficult cases proves to be Alec d'Urberville. Angel's mother, Mrs. Clare, is a loving but snobbish woman who places great importance on social class. She wants Angel to marry a suitable woman, meaning someone with the proper social, financial, and religious background. She initially looks down on Tess, but later grows to appreciate her. Angel has 2 brothers. Reverend Felix Clare is a village curate, and Reverend Cuthbert Clare is a classical scholar and dean at Cambridge. Tess's younger sister is Eliza Louisa Durbeyfield, or Lisa Lou. Tess believes Lisa Lou has all of her own good qualities and none of her bad ones. She encourages Angel to look after and even marry Lisa Lou after she dies. Sorrow is Tess's son with Alec d'Urberville. He dies in early infancy after Tess christens him herself. Finally, there is Mercy Chant, the daughter of a friend of Reverend Clare. Mr. Clare hopes Angel will marry Mercy. But after Angel marries Tess, Mercy becomes engaged to his brother Cuthbert instead. Now we will delve deeper into an analysis of the major characters, starting with Tess Durbeyfield. Tess is intelligent, strikingly attractive, and known for her deep moral sensitivity and passionate intensity. She is undeniably the central character of the novel that bears her name. But Hardy makes her more than just a distinctive individual. She becomes a kind of mythic heroine. Her formal name, Teresa, recalls Saint Teresa of Avila, another martyr whose vision of a higher reality cost her her life. Other characters often refer to Tess in mythical terms. For instance, Angel calls her a daughter of nature and uses the Greek mythological names Artemis and Demeter to describe her. The narrator himself sometimes portrays Tess as more than just an individual woman, but as something closer to a mythical incarnation of womanhood. At one point he says her eyes are neither black nor blue nor gray nor violet, rather all these shades together, like those of an almost standard woman. This suggests that Tess's story might be a standard story, representing a deeper and larger experience than that of a single person. In part, Tess represents the changing role of agricultural workers in England in the late 19th century. She has an education that her unschooled parents lack, having passed the 6th standard of the national schools. Because of this, she doesn't quite fit into the folk culture of her ancestors. At the same time, financial constraints keep her from rising to a higher social station. We learn on the first page of the novel that she belongs in that higher world, with the news that the Derbyfields are the surviving members of the noble and ancient d'Urberville family. There is aristocracy in Tess's blood, visible in her graceful beauty, yet she is forced to work as a farmhand and milkmaid. Her speech, while more polished than her mother's, is not quite at the level of Alec's or Angel's. She is caught in between, both socially and culturally. Tess, therefore, is a symbol of the unclear and unstable ideas of class in 19th-century Britain, where old family lines kept their glamour, but where cold economic realities made sheer wealth more important than inner nobility. Beyond her social symbolism, Tess represents fallen humanity in a religious sense, something the frequent biblical allusions in the novel remind us of. Just as Tess's clan was once glorious, but is now sadly diminished, so too did the glory of Adam and Eve fade with their expulsion from Eden. Tess represents what is known in Christian theology as original sin, the degraded state in which all humans live. This is true even when, like Tess herself after the death of her horse Prince, or after succumbing to Alec, they are not wholly responsible for the sins for which they are punished. Her torment represents the most universal side of Tess. She is the myth of the human who suffers for crimes that are not her own and lives a life more degraded than she deserves. Next, let's analyze Alec d'Urberville. Alec is a carefree 24-year-old man, heir to a fortune, and bearer of a name that his father purchased. He is the nemesis and downfall of Tess's life. His first name, Alexander, suggests a conqueror like Alexander the Great, who seizes what he wants without regard for moral propriety. Yet he is more slippery than a grand conqueror. His full last name, Stoke Urberville, symbolizes the split character of his family. Their origins are much simpler than their pretensions to grandeur. After all, Stokes is a blunt and inelegant name. This divided and duplicitous character is evident to the very end of the novel. For example, he quickly abandons his newfound Christian faith upon meeting Tess again. It is hard to believe Alec holds his religion or anything else with sincerity. His supposed conversion may just be a new role he is playing. This duplicity is so intense, and its consequences for Tess are so severe, that he becomes almost diabolical. The first part of his surname, Stoke, conjures associations with fiery energies, like stoking a furnace or the flames of hell. His devilish associations are clear when he wields a pitchfork while speaking to Tess early in the novel, and when he seduces her just as the serpent in Genesis seduced Eve. Like the famous depiction of Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost, Alec doesn't try to hide his bad qualities. In fact, he revels in them. At one point, he bluntly tells Tess, "I suppose I am a bad fellow, a damn bad fellow. I was born bad, and I have lived bad, and I shall die bad in all probability." There is a frank acceptance in this admission, and no shame. Some readers feel Alec is too wicked to be believable, but like Tess, he represents a larger moral principle rather than a real individual man. Like Satan, Alec symbolizes the base forces of life that drive a person away from moral perfection and greatness. Finally, let's look at Angel Clare. Angel is a free-thinking son, born into the family of a provincial parson. He is determined to become a farmer instead of going to Cambridge like his conformist brothers. Angel represents a rebellious striving toward a personal vision of goodness. He is a secularist who yearns to work for the honor and glory of man, as he tells his father, rather than for the honor and glory of God in a distant world. As a typical young 19th-century progressive, Angel sees human society as something to be remolded and improved, and he fervently believes in the nobility of man. He rejects the values handed to him and sets off in search of his own. His love for Tess, a mere milkmaid, and his social inferior, is one expression of his disdain for tradition. This independent spirit contributes to his charisma and makes him the object of affection for all the milkmaids at Talbothays. As his name suggests, Angel is not quite of this world, but seems to float above it in a transcendent sphere of his own. The narrator says that Angel shines rather than burns, and that he is closer to the intellectually aloof poet Shelley than to the passionate poet Byron. His love for Tess can seem abstract, as we might guess when he calls her daughter of nature or Demeter. To him, Tess may be more of an archetype or an ideal than a flesh and blood woman with a complicated life. Angel's ideals of human purity are too elevated to be applied to actual people. Mrs. Durbeyfield's easygoing moral beliefs are much more easily accommodated to real lives like Tess's. Angel awakens to the actual complexities of real-world morality after his failure in Brazil. Only then does he realize he has been unfair to Tess. His moral system is readjusted as he is brought down to earth. Ironically, in this novel, it is not the angel who guides the human, but the human who instructs the angel, although it comes at the cost of her own life. Now we'll explore some of the major themes, motifs, and symbols in the novel. Themes are the fundamental ideas explored in a literary work. One major theme is the injustice of existence. Unfairness dominates the lives of Tess and her family to such an extent that it seems to be a general aspect of human existence in the story. Tess does not mean to kill her family's horse, Prince, but she is punished anyway, just as she is unfairly punished for her own rape by Alec. Nor is there justice waiting in heaven. Christianity teaches that there is compensation in the afterlife for unhappiness suffered in this life. But the only devout Christian we meet is Reverend Clare, who seems more or less content in his life anyway. For others in their misery, Christianity offers little solace. Mrs. Durbeyfield never mentions otherworldly rewards. The converted Alec preaches heavenly justice, but his faith seems shallow and insincere. Overall, the moral atmosphere of the novel is not one of Christian justice, but of pagan injustice. The forces that rule human life are unpredictable and not necessarily well-disposed toward us. The pre-Christian rituals practiced by the farm workers at the beginning of the novel and Tess's final rest at Stonehenge at the end remind us of a world where the gods are not just and fair, but whimsical and uncaring. When the narrator concludes the novel by stating that justice was done and the president of the immortals had ended his sport with Tess, we are reminded that justice must be put in ironic quotation marks. It is not really just at all. What passes for justice is in fact one of the pagan gods enjoying a bit of sport or a frivolous game. Another key theme is the changing ideas of social class in Victorian England. The novel presents a complex picture of both the importance of social class and the difficulty of defining it. The Durbeyfields are a powerful symbol of how class was no longer evaluated in Victorian times as it had been in the Middle Ages, that is, by blood alone. The Durbeyfields certainly have purity of blood, yet for the parson and nearly everyone else, this fact is just a piece of genealogical trivia. In the Victorian context, cash matters more than lineage. This explains how Simon Stokes, Alec's father, was able to use his large fortune to purchase a distinguished family name and transform his clan into the Stoke d'Urbervilles. They pass for what the Durbeyfields truly are, authentic nobility, simply because the definition of class has changed. This class confusion also affects the Clare family. Their most promising son, Angel, is intent on becoming a farmer and marrying a milkmaid, bypassing the traditional privileges of a Cambridge education. His willingness to work alongside farm laborers helps endear him to Tess. Their acquaintance would not have been possible if he were a more traditional and elitist aristocrat. Thus, the three main characters in the Angel-Tess-Alec triangle are all strongly marked by confusion about their social classes, making it a central concern of the novel. A third theme is men dominating women. One of the recurrent themes is the way men can dominate women, exerting a power over them linked primarily to their maleness. Sometimes this command is purposeful, as when Alec acknowledges how bad he is for seducing Tess for his own momentary pleasure. Alec's act of abuse is the most life-altering event Tess experiences, and is clearly the most serious instance of male domination. But there are other, less blatant examples. When Tess's friends, Reddy and Marion, react to Angel choosing Tess, their responses are disturbing. Reddy attempts suicide, and Marion becomes an alcoholic. Their schoolgirl-type crushes on Angel seem to reveal an unhealthy obsession. This devotion is not merely fanciful love, but an appearance of being utterly dominated by a desire for a man who doesn't even realize they are interested in him. This kind of unconscious male domination is perhaps even more unsettling than Alec's outward cruelty. Even Angel's love for Tess, as pure and gentle as it seems, dominates her in an unhealthy way. Angel substitutes an idealized picture of Tess's country purity for the real woman he continually refuses to get to know. When he calls her names like daughter of nature, we feel he may be denying her true self in favor of a mental image he prefers. Thus, her identity and experiences are suppressed, even if unknowingly. This pattern of male domination is finally reversed with Tess's murder of Alec. For the first time, a woman takes active steps against a man. Of course, this act only leads to even greater suppression by men when the male police officers arrest Tess at Stonehenge. Nevertheless, for a moment, the accepted pattern is interrupted, and Tess's act seems heroic. Next, we'll look at some recurring motifs in the story. Motifs are structures, contrasts, or literary devices that help develop the text's major themes. One recurring motif is birds. Images of birds appear throughout the novel. Traditionally, birds are associated with a higher spiritual realm. The Christian dove of peace and the romantic songbirds of poets like Keats and Shelley lead us to expect birds will have a positive meaning. Tess occasionally hears bird calls on her hikes, and their free expression stands in stark contrast to her own silent and constrained existence. When Tess works for Mrs. d'Urberville, she finds that the old woman's pet finches are often released to fly free around the room. These birds offer images of hope and liberation, yet there is also irony attached to them. Mrs. d'Urberville's birds leave little white spots on the upholstery, which a servant, perhaps Tess, will have to clean. It may be that freedom for one creature means hardship for another, just as Alec's free enjoyment of Tess leads to her lifetime of suffering. Later, when Tess finds pheasants maimed by hunters, birds no longer seem free. They seem oppressed and submissive. These are not romantic songbirds soaring above the earth. They are victims of earthly violence, condemned to suffer and never fly again. Another motif is the Book of Genesis. The Genesis story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is evoked repeatedly, giving the novel a broader philosophical dimension. The roles of Eve and the serpent are clearly drawn. Angel is the noble Adam, newly born, while Tess is the indecisive and troubled Eve. When Tess looks at Angel, she is said to regard him as Eve at her second waking might have regarded Adam. Alec, with his open admission of being bad, is the conniving Satan. He seduces Tess under a tree, giving her sexual knowledge in exchange for her lost innocence. The forest where this happens is called the Chase, suggesting how Eve will be chased from Eden for her sins. This guilt, which can never be erased, is known in Christian theology as original sin. Just as John Durbeyfield is told he doesn't live anywhere and his family is evicted after his death, their homelessness evokes the human exile from Eden. Original sin suggests that humans have fallen from a once great status to a lower station, just as the d'Urbervilles have devolved into the Durbeyfields. This story of the fall is more than a social fall. It is an explanation of how all of us, not just Tess, never quite seem to live up to our expectations. A third motif is variant names. The transformation of the d'Urbervilles into the Durbeyfields is one example of the common phenomenon of renaming in the novel. Names matter. Tess knows she is a lowly Durbeyfield, but part of her still believes her aristocratic original name should be restored. John Durbeyfield goes a step further and actually renames himself Sir John, as his tombstone shows. Another character who renames himself is Simon Stokes, who purchased a family tree and became Simon Stoke d'Urberville. The question raised by these name changes is the extent to which an altered name brings an altered identity. Alec acts notoriously ungentlemanly, but by the end, his lordly bearing almost makes him seem deserving of the name his father bought. Hardy's interest in name changes makes reality itself seem changeable. The village of Blakemore, we are reminded twice, is also known as Blackmore. Hardy famously renames the southern English countryside as Wessex, imposing a fictional map on a real place. Reality may not be as solid as the names people give it. Finally, let's explore some key symbols. Symbols are objects, characters, or figures used to represent abstract ideas. One important symbol is Prince, the family horse. When Tess dozes off and loses control of the wagon, the resulting death of the Durbeyfield horse, Prince, is what spurs Tess to seek aid from the d'Urbervilles. The horse's death is a powerful plot motivator, and its name is a potent symbol of Tess's own claims to aristocracy. Like the horse, Tess herself has a high-class name, but is doomed to a lowly life of physical labor. Interestingly, Prince's death occurs right after Tess dreams of ancient knights, having just heard the news of her family's aristocratic heritage. The horse is pierced by a piece of metal on a mail coach, reminiscent of a wound from a medieval joust. In an odd way, her dream of medieval glory comes true, as her horse dies a heroic death. Yet this dream of meeting a prince, happening at the same moment she kills her own prince and with him her family's only means of support, is a tragic foreshadowing of her own story. The horse's death symbolizes the sacrifice of real-world goods for the sake of fantasizing about a better world. Another symbol is the d'Urberville family vault. The vault is a double-edged symbol. It represents both the majestic grandeur and the lifeless hollowness of the aristocratic family name. It symbolizes both the glory of life and the end of life. Since Tess herself moves from passivity to active murder by the end of the novel, attaining a kind of personal grandeur even as she brings death to others and to herself, the vault is a powerful site for the final meeting between her and Alec. Alec brings Tess both his lofty name and, indirectly, her own death. It is natural that he meets her in the vault, where she reads her own name inscribed in stone and feels the presence of death. Yet the vault that sounds so glamorous at the beginning of the novel seems strangely hollow and meaningless by the end. When Alec stomps on its floor, it produces only a hollow echo. When Tess is executed, her ancestors are said to snooze on in their crypts, as if they don't care about the fate of a member of their own family. The secret of the vault may be that its grandiosity is ultimately meaningless. A final symbol to consider is Brazil. It's rather surprising for a novel set so solidly in rural England, but the narration shifts briefly to Brazil when Angel leaves Tess to start a farming career. For a Victorian English reader, Brazil was even more exotic than America or Australia. It seems to promise a better life, far from the familiar world. Brazil, then, symbolizes a fantasy land, a place where dreams come true. As his name suggests, Angel is a lofty visionary who lacks real-world experience. He may know how to milk cows, but he doesn't yet know the difference between an exotic dream and an everyday reality. Inevitably, his experience in the imagined dream world of Brazil is a disaster that he barely survives. His failure teaches him that ideals do not exist in life. This lesson helps him reevaluate his disappointment with Tess's imperfections. For Angel, Brazil symbolizes the impossibility of ideals, but also forgiveness and the acceptance of life in spite of those disappointed ideals. And now we begin the story of Tess of the d'Urbervilles. Phase the First, The Maiden. Chapter 1, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 1 through 3. Our story begins as a middle-aged peddler named John Durbeyfield is on his way home to the village of Marlet. He has an encounter with an old parson, Parson Tringham, who surprises him by addressing him as Sir John. The parson explains that he is a student of history and recently discovered that Durbeyfield is a direct descendant of an ancient and knightly family, the d'Urbervilles. Parson Tringham adds that these noble roots are so far back in history that they are essentially meaningless today. But Durbeyfield becomes quite self-important after this discovery. He immediately sends for a horse and carriage to take him the rest of the way home, feeling he is too grand to walk. At the very same moment, Durbeyfield's daughter, Tess, is enjoying the local May Day festivities with the other young women from her village. As part of a local custom, they are all dressed in white, carrying white willow branches and flowers, in a symbolic ritual of purity and springtime. Suddenly, her father rides by in his hired carriage. Tess is embarrassed by the spectacle, but she defends him from the mockery of the other girls. The group then goes to the village green for dancing, where they meet three high-born brothers. Tess takes particular notice of one of them, a young man named Angel Clare. While his two brothers want to continue on their journey, Angel can't pass up the chance to dance. The girls ask him to choose a partner, and he chooses a girl other than Tess. They dance for a short time before Angel has to leave to catch up with his brothers. As he's leaving, he notices Tess and feels a pang of regret for not dancing with her instead. When Tess returns home, she receives two pieces of alarming news from her mother, Joan. First, her mother tells her about the family's noble lineage. Second, she learns that her father has been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Mrs. Derbyfield has consulted a large, old book called The Complete Fortune Teller for guidance. She is a firm believer in astrology and superstition, and she keeps the book hidden in the outhouse, irrationally afraid of keeping it inside the house. Mr. Derbyfield is not at home. He is at Rolliver's, the local inn, celebrating his newly discovered heritage. His family is not surprised. Tess's mother goes to fetch him, but she doesn't return. The narrator suggests that she might be enjoying the rare time alone with her husband at the inn. Tess becomes worried and sends her little brother Abraham to see what is taking so long. When no one returns, Tess finally goes to the inn herself. This opening section sets a rich scene describing the landscape of Wessex, a rustic and historical part of southwestern England. We are introduced to a world with its own distinct customs, beliefs, and even a noticeable rural accent. Hardy's detailed descriptions help us enter into the story in a concrete and richly imagined way. We meet the Derbyfield family on the very day they learn of their defunct yet marvelous aristocratic heritage. This news makes Mr. Derbyfield feel immediately liberated from his poverty, even though his situation hasn't actually changed. He is instantly caught up in a dream that takes him from rags to riches. Similarly, Tess is at a holiday festival, a break from her everyday life. The arrival of the three young brothers excites the women, making the day feel even more special. When Angel stops to dance, it's as if a prince has come in search of a princess. Like her father, these young women yearn to escape their poverty and low social status. Mrs. Derbyfield's trust in her fortune-telling book also shows a strong, perhaps irrational hope for the future. She believes something good is meant to happen to her family. Through these characters, we are introduced to the concept of fate, a belief in a predetermined, unavoidable future. Ironically, the parents' blind faith in their ability to climb the social ladder leads them to make costly decisions. The news of their ancestry seems to promise a hopeful change, but it is really just an instrument in the catastrophe that fate will bring. Chapter 2, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 4 through 7. At the inn, Tess's young brother Abraham overhears his parents discussing their plans. They want Tess to go to the wealthy Mrs. d'Urberville, announce her ancestry, and hopefully make her fortune. When Tess arrives, she realizes her father will likely be too tired and drunk to take his load of beehives to the market in a few hours. Her prediction comes true, so she and Abraham decide to deliver the beehives instead. On the way, Abraham tells Tess about their parents' plans. Their conversation then turns to astronomy. Abraham, knowing that stars contain clusters of worlds like their own, asks Tess if those worlds are better or worse than theirs. Tess boldly answers that the other stars are better, and that theirs is a blighted one. She says this is the reason for all of their family's misfortunes. Abraham falls asleep, and eventually, so does Tess. She dreams of a gentlemanly suitor who grimaces and laughs at her. Suddenly, Tess and Abraham are awakened by a disaster. Their carriage has collided with the local mail cart, and the collision has killed Prince, their old horse. Tess is overcome with guilt, realizing that the loss of their horse will be economically devastating for her family. A local farmer helps them get the beehives to market. Tess returns home ashamed, but no one blames her more than she blames herself. She is the only one who truly recognizes the impact the horse's death will have. Mr. Derbyfield labors harder than he has in a month to give his beloved horse a proper burial. Partly because of her guilt over Prince, Tess agrees to her mother's plan to send her to Mrs. d'Urberville. When she arrives at the d'Urberville estate, she doesn't find the crumbling old mansion she expects, but rather a new and fashionable home. She meets Mrs. d'Urberville's son, Alec, who is immediately captivated by Tess's beauty and agrees to try to help her. He says his mother is unwell, but that he will see what he can do. When Tess returns home, she finds a letter from Mrs. d'Urberville offering her a job tending the d'Urberville's fowls. Tess looks for other jobs closer to home but can't find anything. Hoping to earn enough money to buy a new horse for her family, she accepts the job and prepares to go to Trantridge. On the day she is scheduled to leave, Mrs. Derbyfield insists she wear her best clothes and dresses her up. Both parents are pleased, and Mr. Derbyfield even speculates about selling their family title. When Alec arrives to pick Tess up, her parents suddenly become uncertain. The children cry, and Mrs. Derbyfield worries that Alec might try to take advantage of her daughter. These chapters are rich in symbolism. As Tess drives the wagon, she dreams of a nobleman laughing at her plight. She then wakes up to realize she has literally killed their prince, the horse, and with it, the family's means of support. The inability of the Derbyfields to deliver their goods mirrors their inability to transcend their social class. The novel prioritizes work and contribution over nobility and entitlement. The death of the horse immobilizes them, setting the stage for the tragedy to come. The novel is divided into 7 phases, each telling a part of Tess's story. These chapters show Tess's development into a responsible young adult. The guilt she feels over Prince's death compels her to try to repay her family, leading her to the D'Urbervilles and into a dangerous situation. This marks the beginning of her downfall. Distinct pictures of the characters are already emerging. We see Tess's strong sense of responsibility, her beauty, and her conscience. We see her parents' weaknesses, her father's laziness, and her mother's simple-mindedness, which add urgency to Tess's duties. Alec is clearly lascivious and opportunistic, an impression reinforced in every scene. He is associated with darkness, reflecting his shady character. He behaves inappropriately from their first meeting, calling her my pretty cause. Even Angel Clare, who appears only briefly, is portrayed as graceful and kind. By giving us a strong sense of these characters, Hardy generates a great deal of suspense, drawing us into his plots of seduction, betrayal, and loyalty. Chapter 3. Summary and analysis of chapters 8 through 11. On the way to the D'Urberville estate, Alec drives recklessly. Tess pleads with him to stop, but he continues at a fast pace, telling her to hold on to his waist. She does so only out of fear. On the next steep hill, he urges her to hold on again, but she refuses. He agrees to slow down only if she will let him kiss her. Tess allows him to kiss her on the cheek, but when she unthinkingly wipes the kiss off, he becomes angry. They argue, and Tess finishes the journey on foot. The next morning, Tess meets Mrs. D'Urberville for the first time and discovers that she is blind. Tess is surprised by the old woman's lack of appreciation for her coming to work there. Mrs. D'Urberville asks Tess to place each of her fowls on her lap so she can pet them, and tells Tess to whistle to her bullfinches every morning. Later, when Tess finds she cannot whistle, Alec offers to help her learn how. Several months pass. One evening, Tess goes to a local fair with some friends. She declines Alec's offer to take her home, choosing to wait for her friends instead. When they are finally ready to leave, Tess finds that some of them are drunk and irritated by the attention Alec has been giving her. The scene grows unpleasant. Suddenly, Alec arrives on his horse, and Tess finally agrees to let him carry her away. Alec lets the horse wander off the path and deep into the woods. There, he tries to convince Tess to take him as a lover. Tess is unwilling. Alec realizes they have become lost in the fog. He gives Tess his coat and goes to look for a landmark, telling her he has bought her father a new horse to try to win her over. When he returns, Tess is asleep. Alec uses this opportunity to take advantage of her sexually. These chapters mark the second half of the first phase, subtitled The Maiden. The main plot follows Tess's life from her father's discovery of their noble heritage to her falling prey to Alec. This event is a true catastrophe for her. In Victorian England, any sexual encounter outside of marriage would bring a young woman's social condemnation, regardless of the circumstances. In a way, Tess's fall is a direct result of her father's discovery. She is sent to take advantage of a family connection, but instead Alec takes advantage of her. The plot hinges on many unfortunate coincidences, like Simon Stokes choosing the name D'Urberville, the accidental death of Prince, and Tess being held up by her drunken friends. Hardy uses this technique to convey a sense that the universe itself, in the guise of fate, opposes Tess and foreordains her tragedy. Some critics, however, have found these coincidences to be a bit unbelievable. Hardy spends a great deal of time creating his world. One of the novel's strongest features is its evocation of the landscape. The Vale of Blackmoor is presented as a lovely rustic ideal. The weather often adapts to the action of the story, especially when the confusing, disorienting mist cloaks the forest on the night of Tess's fall. The imagery of mist and shadows mirrors Tess's own confusion and insecurity. It also reflects the mystery with which Hardy cloaks what actually happens that night. He never reveals the specific details that would let us decide if Tess was a willing participant or a victim of rape. The narrator doesn't seem to care about this distinction. He describes Alec's actions as ruthless and unjust, but he does not judge Tess at all. This portrayal would have been scandalous to Hardy's original readers, who would have judged the woman more harshly. The narrator avoids commenting on Tess's behavior by remarking that her disgrace was simply meant to be. It was fated. If her misfortune is predestined, she is not responsible for it and cannot be judged. This is typical of Hardy. He makes us care deeply about Tess and think about her decisions, then shocks us by suggesting that these moral considerations are irrelevant. Even when Tess tries her hardest to be good, her bad luck conspires against her. Phase the Second, Maiden No More. Chapter 4. Summary and analysis of chapters 12 through 15. After a few weeks of confused involvement with Alec, Tess realizes she feels no love for him. She decides to flee the d'Urberville mansion in the early morning. Alec discovers her on the road and tries to convince her to return. When she refuses, he offers to drive her home, but she refuses even that. Alec tells her to let him know if she ever needs help. As Tess continues on her way, she passes a sign painter who is busy painting Bible passages on walls and gates. He interrupts his work to paint a sign that says, "Thy damnation slumbereth not." These words resonate in Tess's mind. She continues home, where her mother is surprised to see her. Her mother is frustrated with her for refusing to marry Alec, but she softens when Tess reminds her that she never warned her of the danger she faced. Some of Tess's friends come to visit, and in their high-spirited company, Tess feels cheered. But in the morning, she lapses back into depression. The future seems endless and bleak. She tries to attend church, but hears the crowd whispering about her. Shaken, she falls into the habit of only going out after dark. The following August, Tess decides it's time to stop pitying herself and helps her village with the harvest. Her baby boy, conceived with Alec, falls ill. Tess becomes worried that he will die without a proper christening. She decides to christen him herself and names him Sorrow. When he dies the next morning, Tess asks the parson if her christening was sufficient for a Christian burial. Moved, the parson replies that although he cannot bury the child himself, Tess may do so. That night, Tess lays Sorrow to rest in a corner of the churchyard and makes a little cross for his grave. Tess realizes she can never be happy in her home village of Marlott. She longs to begin a new life in a place where her past is unknown. The next year, she gets the chance to become a milkmaid at the Talbothays dairy. She seizes the opportunity, spurred on by what the narrator calls the invincible instinct towards self-delight. This second phase lays out the consequences of Tess's fall. She flees Trantridge, pledging violence to Alec in an uncharacteristic way, which shows she does not intend to remain a passive victim of fate. At home, she incurs her mother's disappointment. Later, she bears her doomed son, Sorrow, and buries him against the rules of the church and society. She is miserably unhappy during this period. But her unhappiness seems to stem as much from her fall from social grace and her own troubled conscience as from her child's birth and death. When Tess asks her mother, "How could I be expected to know? I was a child when I left this house 4 months ago. Why didn't you tell me there was danger in menfolk?" She sees herself as a victim of her own ignorance. When she refuses to marry Alec despite the social advantage it would give her, and refuses his offers of help because she does not love him, we see her as more than just an unwitting victim. Her integrity and courage make her heroic. This phase is primarily transitional, taking Tess from the scene of her disgrace to the promise of a new life at Talbothays. but it also crystallizes some important themes. We see Tess's healthy desire to simply be happy, which is perhaps the source of her great courage. Additionally, the novel's exploration of nobility continues. We begin to see Tess as truly noble through her goodness and determination, while Alec, the son of a merchant, is simply an impostor. Phase the third, the rally. Chapter 5, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 16 through 19. In good spirits, Tess sets out for her new job at the Talbothays Dairy, located in the Valley of the Great Dairies. The new scenery enchants her, and the beautiful day puts her in an optimistic mood. She passes the burial ground of her ancient ancestors but decides to keep going. When she arrives at Talbothays, the master dairyman, Richard Crick, treats her kindly. She quickly fits in and feels at home. She notices a familiar-looking man and recognizes him as the highbrow man from the May Day dance, Angel Clare. Tess learns that Angel is the son of a respected clergyman. His two brothers have also joined the church, but Angel prefers a life in agriculture and has come to the dairy to learn about its work. The other dairymaids talk about him a lot, and many of them seem to have a crush on him. Now the narrator shifts away from Tess's point of view to tell us about Angel's background. Angel is the most gifted of the three brothers, but because his father saw a university education only as preparation for a clerical life, Angel decided not to go to Cambridge. He has doubts about church doctrines and felt it would be dishonest to join the clergy. After trying a business profession in London and having a brief affair with an older woman, he decided that a life on the soil would allow him to preserve his intellectual liberty. Now 26 years old, he is learning about farming firsthand. At first, he acts a bit aloof, but he soon befriends the other workers. He finds himself quickly drawn to Tess's beauty and thinks she seems uncommonly virginal and pure. Tess, however, tries to stay away from him out of shame for her secret past. After a few weeks, Tess discovers that Angel is breaking the dairy's rules by arranging for her favorite cows to be in her milking line. She tells him about her discovery. Later that night, she walks alone in the garden, listening to him play his harp. He comes down to join her, and they have an intimate conversation. Angel finds it compelling that a girl as young and beautiful as Tess has such a dark view of life. Tess deflects his questions with general comments and asks about him instead. She is interested in his education and wonders why such a well-bred man would choose to become a farmer. He offers to tutor her, but she refuses, claiming that the answers she seeks are not to be found in books. These chapters portray the beginning of the happiest period of Tess's life. The narrator notes that she had never been in her recent life so happy as she was now, possibly never would be so happy again. The change in tone is matched by a healthier landscape. Tess's simple, rustic beauty fits perfectly with the country paradise of the dairy, and the ripening summer weather matches the blossoming romance between Tess and Angel. Tess is in control of her emotions and her life. The setting allows her to deal with her past melancholy. Her assertion that the answers she seeks are not in books shows that she wants to learn directly from life experiences. She wants to become knowledgeable and self-sufficient, a contrast to her mother, who consulted a fortune-telling book for guidance. Just as Angel seeks independence from his family's legacy, Tess seeks independence from hers. Angel is now fully introduced into the novel. The contrast between him and the ruthless Alec d'Urberville emerges vividly. Angel has soothing, elegant conversations with Tess and gives her idealistic nicknames like Artemis. Alec, on the other hand, mocked her with demeaning nicknames like Cause. Through this contrast, Angel appears as a savior to the troubled but coping Tess. If you're enjoying this part of Tess's story, where she finds a moment of peace and happiness at Talbothays Dairy, consider supporting this project. You can try a free 30-day Audible trial or purchase the book through the Amazon link in the description. As an Amazon associate, we earn from qualifying purchases, and your support helps us continue to bring classic literature to life. Thank you, and now, let's return to the story. Chapter 6, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 20 through 24. As the months pass, Angel and Tess grow closer, and Tess finds herself in the happiest phase of her life. They wake up early before the others, and feel as if they are the only people on Earth. The dairy seems to be an Eden, with Angel as Adam and Tess as Eve. Angel sees her as the visionary essence of woman and playfully calls her Artemis and Demeter. Tess doesn't understand these nicknames and simply tells him to call her Tess. Life on the dairy begins to change. There is worry about the butter, which is not churning properly. Mrs. Crick jokes that this sort of thing only happens when someone on the farm falls in love. Indeed, the milkmaids often discuss Angel's noticeable love for Tess. Tess, however, does not want to marry because she is still ashamed of her past. After some further churning, the butter begins to set, and everyone's fears melt away, except for Tess's. One morning, the Cricks receive a letter from a customer complaining that the butter has a sharp taste, or a twang. Mr. Crick realizes the cows must have been eating garlic weeds. The dairymaids go out to search for them. Tess feels faint, and Mr. Crick encourages her to rest. Angel stops with her. She makes a point of mentioning the virtues of her friends Iz and Reddy, but Angel indicates he has no romantic interest in them. A couple of months after her arrival, Tess and her friends set out for church. A torrential downpour the day before has left the road flooded. Angel offers to carry the girls across. They all notice that he takes the longest with Tess, and they each realize he prefers her. Tess begins to avoid Angel, but she watches his grace and self-discipline from afar. One night, her friends Marion, Iz, and Reddy each confess their love for Angel. Tess feels guilty, since she too loves him, but has already decided never to marry. She wonders if she is wrong to take so much of his time. Later that summer, as they are milking cows, Angel is overcome with his feelings for Tess. He embraces her. She gives in for a moment before trying to pull away. Angel tells Tess he loves her and is surprised to hear the words come out of his mouth. No one notices their encounter, and they both return to their milking, shaken. These chapters mark the end of the third phase, the rally, which concerns Tess's invincible instinct towards self-delight. The harsh irony of Angel's first impression of Tess as virginal is underplayed by her self-sacrificing virtue. She even avoids him, thinking her friends deserve him more. A new conflict arises between Tess's new love for Angel and her moral reservations about acting on it. This indecisiveness is mirrored by the new problems at the dairy concerning the butter. Just as certain agents have tainted the butter, Tess feels that the agents of her past have tainted her. Given Tess's uncompromisable virtue, her personal reservations about marrying Angel seem designed to arouse our sympathy. It seems ludicrous that she should have to suffer for a single past error. This line of reasoning is Hardy's argument. Still, Tess seems fated to suffer, the victim of what the narrator calls the ill-judged execution of the well-judged plan of things. Tess is also compared and contrasted with the other dairymaids. She sees herself as their equal, but Angel sees her as his sole perfect mate. The final scene, in which they are both overcome by their love, is a wonderful conclusion to this section, which has focused on their growing attraction. Tess is surprised by Angel's confession and is shaken by its implications. She knows her dark past will stand in the way of their future, and even as their love grows, these problems show no signs of disappearing. Phase the fourth, the consequence. Chapter 7. Summary and analysis of chapters 25 through 31. Angel feels he needs time to understand his relationship with Tess, so he decides to spend a few days visiting his family in Emminster. At his father's house, he finds his parents with his two brothers, Reverend Felix, a town curate, and Reverend Cuthbert, a college dean at Cambridge. Angel's family notices that his manners have worsened from his time with common farm folk, while Angel thinks his brothers have become mentally limited by their comfortable situations. That evening, Angel and his father discuss his marriage prospects. The Clares hope Angel will marry Mercy Chant, a pious neighbor girl. They stress the importance of Christian piety in a wife. Angel argues that a wife who understands farm life would be an asset and tells them about Tess, emphasizing her religious sincerity. The family agrees to meet her. Angel's father also tells him that he has saved the money that would have been used for his college education. Since Angel didn't go, he is willing to give it to Angel to buy land. Before Angel leaves, his father tells him about his efforts to convert the local populace and mentions his failed attempts to tame a young miscreant named Alec d'Urberville. This increases Angel's dislike for old families. Angel returns to the dairy and finds Tess just waking from a nap. He takes her in his arms and asks her to marry him. Tess replies that she loves him but cannot marry him. Angel says he will give her time to think, but she insists the marriage is impossible. Nevertheless, in the coming days, Angel continues to try to persuade her, and Tess soon realizes she loves him too much to keep refusing. In the early fall, Angel again asks Tess to marry him. She hesitates, saying one of the other girls might make a better wife. She still feels she cannot marry him because of her past. But Angel believes she is only objecting because of her low social status and thinks she will accept soon. Tess believes she must tell Angel about her lineage and her dark past, but she hesitates and resolves to tell him later. Gossip spreads through the farm about a failed marriage. A man named Jack Dollop married a widow for her money, only to discover that her income vanishes as a result of the marriage. Most people at the dairy think the widow was wrong to deceive him and should have been truthful. This widespread opinion makes Tess nervous again about her own past. One day, while doing chores, Angel mentions they are near the ancestral territory of the d'Urbervilles. Tess takes the opportunity to tell him that she descends from that family. He is pleased, realizing that her noble blood will make her a better match in his family's eyes. At last, Tess agrees to marry him and begins to weep. She asks if she can write to her mother. When Angel learns she is from Marlott, he remembers where he has seen her before, at the May Day dance. When Mrs. Derbyfield receives Tess's letter, she immediately writes back, advising her daughter not to tell Angel about her past. Tess luxuriates in her happiness throughout October. When Angel asks her to finalize their wedding date, she again seems hesitant. When he announces their engagement to Mr. Crick in front of the other dairymaids, Tess is impressed by their joyous reaction. She feels she can finally express her happiness, but soon feels unworthy of Angel. She decides she must finally tell him about her past. It's clear that Angel has become very different from his family. His brothers have excelled in the ministry and intellectual circles, and he feels he no longer has anything in common with them. His family is somewhat snobbish. They are respectable in their religious observances, but seem to lack the ability to understand people on an emotional level. For Angel's mother, Mrs. Clare, Tess represents the fall of the great Victorian era. She doesn't accept Tess because she believes Tess will lower the family's status. For the Clares, marriage is about social, financial, and religious prosperity, not love. Angel's progressiveness sets him apart. Tess's denial of Angel shows her concern about her past. To Angel, however, her denial seems to signify that she is even more virtuous than he thought. He believes she is refusing him due to her lack of social status, which makes her convictions seem almost too pure. The story of Jack Dollop's wife makes Tess nervous again. She understands that a woman's virginity is considered supremely important by her society and that Angel sees her as completely pure. Telling him about her d'Urberville lineage is difficult enough. He takes that news well, but she doesn't gain confidence that her more shameful revelation will be met with the same excitement. Mrs. Derbyfield advises Tess against the ethically sound choice of telling Angel. Her advice stems from love and concern. She doesn't want anything to interfere with her daughter making an advantageous marriage. Tess is relieved to receive this advice, but knows deep down that she cannot follow it. Her conscience is too strong to live with the secret. Chapter 8. Summary and analysis of chapters 32 through 34. Tess agrees to leave the dairy with Angel around Christmas, and their wedding is set for December 31st. Angel plans for them to spend that time visiting a flour mill and staying in a home that once belonged to the d'Urbervilles. He buys Tess clothes for their wedding and, to her relief, quietly gets a marriage license rather than publicizing their intent to marry. While out shopping, Angel and Tess encounter a man from Alec d'Urberville's village. The man disparages Tess and denies her virginity. Angel strikes him, but when the man apologizes, Angel gives him some money. Tess is racked with guilt. That night, she writes a confession and slips it under Angel's door. Strangely, in the morning, Angel's behavior toward her hasn't changed, and he doesn't mention the letter. Tess figures out that it must have slipped under the carpet and that Angel never saw it. On the morning of the wedding, she again tries to tell him about her past, but he cuts her off, saying there will be time for such revelations after they are married. They are married, but as they are leaving for the ceremony, a rooster crows in the mid-afternoon, which is seen as a bad omen. After the wedding, the couple travels to the old D'Urberville mansion where they will stay. Tess receives a package from Angel's father containing jewelry that Angel's godmother had bequeathed to his future wife. Their happy moment is broken when the man from the dairy arrives with their luggage and bad news about Tess's friends. After the wedding, Reddy attempted suicide and Marion became an alcoholic. After this disclosure, Angel asks Tess for forgiveness, telling her of his own past indiscretion with an older woman in London. Tess says that she too has a confession and tells him of her past with Alec. This phase, The Consequence, fits the seesaw scheme of the novel. The story alternates between sections that build to a climax and sections that detail the results. Phase 1 built to Tess's fall from grace. Phase 2 laid out the consequences. Phase 3 built toward her union with Angel. Phase 4 brings the consequences of their love. Aside from mystical ill omens, like the rooster crowing, the real conflict is moral. It's a struggle between Tess's desire to be happily loved and her conscious obligation to tell Angel about her past. Because she has a strong instinct for self-delight, she is able to delay her conscience. But since her sense of moral duty is even stronger, she cannot resist it forever. The universe is still hostile to Tess. Fate toys with her in the form of accidental mishaps. Had Angel received her note, the story might have gone differently, but the letter happens to slip under the carpet, and another chance to avert her tragedy is lost. This may seem like an unbelievable coincidence, but the universe expresses its hostility toward Tess through such portentous mishaps throughout the novel. Angel can appear rather spoiled, the youngest son in a privileged family who seeks adventure. In a sense, he is more childish and naive than the extremely responsible Tess. He may be angelic not in his morality, but in the sense that he is cherubic and childlike, needing to grow and develop a truer love for Tess. Social prejudice continues to be a theme. Angel is pleased to discover Tess's noble background because he knows it will placate his mother, who places high stock in social class. On the one hand, it's superficial of Mrs. Clare to do so. On the other, Tess is nobly born and does possess stereotypical noble characteristics like beauty, courage, and integrity. Phase the 5th, The Woman Pays. Chapter 9, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 35 through 39. Angel is distraught by Tess's confession. He begs her to deny it, but she cannot. He flees the house, and Tess follows him. For hours, they walk the grounds of the mansion. Tess tells him she will do anything he asks, even offering to drown herself. Angel orders her to go back to the house. When he returns, Tess is asleep. After an uncomfortable moment looking at the portraits of the D'Urberville ladies, Angel goes to sleep in a different room. 3 miserable days go by. Tess wonders if they should get a divorce, but learns the law doesn't allow it. Finally, Tess offers to go home, and Angel tells her she should. That night, Tess wakes up and discovers that Angel is sleepwalking. He stumbles into her room and seizes her in his arms. Moaning that his wife is dead, he carries her over a narrow bridge and into the churchyard, where he lays her in an empty coffin. Tess carefully leads Angel back into the house. In the morning, he has no memory of the event. The couple makes a brief stop at the dairy on their way to Tess's village of Marlott. They behave awkwardly together in public. Angel leaves Tess near her village, telling her he will try to accept her past, but that she should not try to come to him until he comes for her. Tess returns home sadly and confesses what has happened to her mother. Mrs. Durbeyfield calls her a fool. Tess is miserable at home. When a letter arrives from Angel saying he has begun looking for a farm in the north, Tess seizes the excuse to leave. She tells her family she is going to join her husband, gives them half of the £50 Angel gave her, and leaves. 3 weeks after their marriage, Angel visits his parents. He tells them he is traveling to Brazil and not taking Tess. His parents are alarmed and disappointed. Angel tells them they will meet Tess in a year when he returns. His parents surprise him by reading a biblical passage about how virtuous wives are loving, loyal, and selfless. Mrs. Clare applies the passage directly to Tess, showing her acceptance of Angel's choice. Angel, overcome with emotion, leaves the room. His mother follows him and guesses that he discovered something dishonorable in Tess's past, but he vehemently denies it. Atmosphere is very important in these chapters. As Tess nears her tragedy, the sense of mystical gloom intensifies. The old, abandoned Gothic d'Urberville mansion is a perfect setting for the emotional change that takes place, mirroring Tess's feelings of emptiness. The sleepwalking scene is Gothic, almost to the point of being ridiculous. It represents the fact that while Tess is alive, Angel's vision of her is dead. The woman he married is not the same woman now, and he cannot reconcile the difference. Just as Alec sexually violated Tess, her past has spiritually violated Angel. His idealized vision of her has shattered. The scene becomes even harder to believe when Angel carries her to the cemetery and places her in a coffin. Hardy may have included this to please a Victorian readership that loved Gothic gloom, but it also attests to the hostility of fate. Hardy means for us to accept Tess's tragedy as foreordained. Angel thinks Tess is dead, and Tess herself wants to be. She loses her strength and tells Angel she wishes to submit. She says, "I will obey you like your wretched slave, even if it is to lie down and die." As they say goodbye, Tess is little more than a walking corpse. It seems Angel has killed her soul. It is now clear that Tess can never escape the wrongs of her past. Chapter 10. Summary and analysis of chapters 40 through 44. Angel puts the jewelry in the bank and arranges for more money to be sent to Tess. He then travels to Wellbridge Farm to finish some business. There, he encounters Iz, one of the milkmaids from Talbothays, and impetuously invites her to go to Brazil with him. Iz agrees and says she loves him. He asks if she loves him more than Tess, and Iz replies that no one could love him as much as Tess did. Angel sadly takes Iz home and leaves for Brazil alone a few days later. Tess finds sporadic work at different dairies, managing to hide her separation from her family. When her money runs low, she is forced to use the money Angel left for her. Her parents write asking for money to repair their cottage roof, and she sends them nearly everything she has. Meanwhile, Angel is ill and struggling in Brazil. Tess is too ashamed to ask the Clares for money. Tess has heard from her friend Marion about a farm where she might find work. Though it's a difficult place, Tess decides to travel there. On her way, she encounters the man from Alec d'Urberville's village who had accused her of promiscuity. She is forced to run and hide from him, feeling as if Alec is hunting her. Continuing on her way, she stumbles upon a flock of pheasants. Some are dead and others are in agony, shot by hunters. She feels an affinity for the birds in pain and instinctively breaks their necks to put them out of their misery. Afterwards, she compares her own plight to theirs and becomes angry at herself for thinking she is the most miserable being on earth. Tess begins to make herself look ugly to protect herself from men, cutting off her eyebrows and dressing in old clothing. She reaches the farm near Flintcomb Ash, and Marion is curious about Angel, but Tess asks her not to inquire. Tess gets a job and sends her new address to her parents. Tess and Marion work digging up rutabagas in rocky ground. Later, Iz Hewitt joins them. In the winter, they are sent to work in the barn where Tess meets the farm's owner. It is the same man from Alec's village. He accuses her of being a poor worker. Marion tells Tess that Angel invited Iz to go with him to Brazil. Tess at first feels she should write to him, but she is soon overcome by doubt. Tess decides to visit Angel's family to find out what has happened to him. On her long walk to the vicarage, she takes off her boots and hides them. She overhears Angel's brothers discussing his unfortunate marriage. When they find her boots, they assume they belong to a peasant. Ashamed and unhappy, Tess decides not to meet Angel's family after all. On her walk home, she stops before a barn where a passionate sermon is being delivered. She looks inside and sees none other than Alec d'Urberville. This phase, the woman pays, moves the tragic forces of the novel into high gear. When Angel leaves, Tess is too proud to ask his family for help, but too dutiful to her own family not to give them money. Her life begins to unravel. The happiness she knew at Talbothays is completely shattered. The contrast between jovial Talbothays and cold, hard Flintcomb Ash hammers home her new situation. Angel encounters several people who all try to tell him that Tess is a noble and loyal wife. When he visits his parents, it seems he is more conventional than they are in his definition of wifely virtue. The Bible passage they read says nothing about premarital celibacy, yet Angel seems to believe chastity is an absolute virtue. Iz freely admits that no one could love him more than Tess, but Angel is unable to register these testaments to Tess's worth. He is still sleepwalking through life, taking her transgression as a personal attack. The decline of Tess's physical appearance indicates the sharp downturn in her life. Her re-encounter with Alec is staged at her moment of greatest weakness. While grieving for Angel, she encounters the man who condemned her to that judgment. The stage is set for her hardest challenge, to avoid the temptation to give in to Alec to help her family. Hardy arranges his story so that Tess's most admirable strengths, like her loyalty, tempt her toward her worst mistake. Fate manifests itself again. Had Tess not overheard Felix and Cuthbert, she might not have left and seen Alec at such a vulnerable moment. Alec's conversion from sexual predator to religious preacher appears the most improbable event of all. And for this, Angel's own father is responsible, adding a final surprising touch. Phase the Sixth, The Convert. Chapter 11, Summary and Analysis of Chapters 45 through 48. Tess has not seen Alec since she left his family's service. When she sees and hears him testifying to his religious conversion, she is struck dumb with terror. She withdraws, but Alec sees her and runs after her, claiming he has to save her soul. He says he has found God through the help of Reverend Clare. Tess, angry and disbelieving, criticizes people like Alec, who ruin others' lives and then try to secure a place in heaven by suddenly converting. She asserts that she cannot put her faith in Alec's religion when a better man, meaning Angel, does not believe in it. Alec expresses fear of Tess. As they come to a stone monument called the Cross in Hand, he asks her to swear that she will never tempt him again. She agrees. Tess later asks a shepherd what the cross in hand signifies and learns it is an object of ill omen. The omen proves correct a few days later when Alec approaches Tess in the fields and asks her to marry him. He proposes they go to Africa as missionaries. Tess replies that she is already married and asks him to leave. At Candlemas, Alec approaches Tess again. This time, he asks her to pray for him. Tess replies that she cannot pray and recites Angel's reasons for doubting church doctrine. Alec appears shaken. He says he is bothered that he has no right to help or protect her, while the man who does have that right has abandoned her. Tess asks him to leave before their conversation can taint her husband's honor. In early spring, Tess has been assigned difficult work as a thresher. Alec appears again, saying he is no longer a preacher and begging Tess to come away with him. He says his love for her has strengthened. Tess slaps his face with a leather glove. He becomes angry but calms himself, asserting his desire to be her master and telling her he is her true husband. He says he will be back in the afternoon to collect her. Alec comes back that afternoon as promised. He walks Tess home and asks her to trust him to take care of her and her family. Tess again refuses. That night, she writes a letter to Angel, finally confessing her loyalty and love and asking for his help against the temptation presented by Alec. Though Alec seems to have undergone a remarkable transformation, he discards his religious posture so effortlessly that it seems to have been a charade. His attempts to contain his desire for Tess seem weak at best. One effect of reintroducing him this way is to heighten the bitter irony of Tess's predicament. She continues to suffer as a social outcast because of a disgrace that is much more Alec's fault than hers. Yet the hypocritical Alec has the luxury to repent and even win acceptance as a preacher. Tess's plight as a woman appears incredibly unjust. Alec's reintroduction comes at Tess's lowest moment. She is observant and distrusting, viewing his conversion as a plot to win her back. The converted Alec appears to her as a wolf in sheep's clothing, come to tempt her a final time. Indeed, their relationship can be seen as an allegory of good struggling with the temptation of evil. Alec continues to tempt Tess with money and security, the two things that would help her family most. He tests her ability to resist. His promise is attractive, but not quite attractive enough. Tess has learned her lesson about risking her happiness for money. She is a much stronger woman now, more knowledgeable about conniving men. As Tess struggles, her need for Angel becomes more desperate. If he were to return, her problems would greatly diminish. She writes to him, pleading that he not judge her on her irretrievable past. Ironically, Alec asks Tess to do the same for him, claiming that he has changed and that she tempted him. Tess's situation makes her very vulnerable to Alec's persuasions. She is heartbroken and needs to be loved. She is also distraught by her family's worsening financial situation. Alec's reasoning seems more valid to her than it has in the past. In a way, Tess and Alec are similar, as they have both fallen and ask for forgiveness. Chapter 12. Summary and analysis of chapters 49 through 52. Tess's letter goes to Angel's parents, who forward it to Brazil. Angel is ready to abandon his idea of farming there. The suffering he has endured has softened his feelings toward Tess. When a more experienced man tells him he was wrong to leave her, Angel feels a powerful regret. When the man dies a few days later, his words assume even more power. Back at the farm, Tess encounters her sister, Lisa Lou. She comes with sorrowful news. Their mother is dying, and their father is also very ill. Tess tells Iz and Marion what has happened and leaves for home. Upon her arrival, Tess does what she can for her mother and then begins working in the garden. One night, she sees Alec working next to her. He again offers to help her and her family. She is sorely tempted but declines. Enraged, Alec leaves. On the way home, Tess's sister tells her that their father has died. This means the family will lose their house, as the lease was tied to John Durbeyfield's life. Tess prepares to move her family to rooms in Kingsbere. Alec arrives and tells Tess the legend of the ghostly D'Urberville coach, a bad omen. He tries to persuade her to move her family to his family's garden home, offering to send her siblings to school. Tess is again sorely tempted but declines. As he leaves, Tess admits to herself that Angel has treated her badly. She writes him a letter saying she will do all she can to forget him, since she can never forgive him. The next day, Tess and her family begin their journey. When they reach Kingsbere, they learn that Joan's letter was late and the rooms have already been rented. They can't find other lodging and end up sleeping in the churchyard, in a plot called D'Urberville Isle. Tess finds Alec lying on a tomb. He tells her he can do more for her than all her noble ancestors. Tess tells him to leave, and he does, promising she will learn to be civil. Tess leans down toward the funeral vault and asks why she is still alive. Meanwhile, Marion and Iz do their part by writing a note to Angel, asking him to go back to Tess. This sixth phase tells the story of Tess's struggle to remain free from Alec despite her family's desperate plight. The real conflict is within Tess, as her integrity and her loyalty to her family pull her in opposite directions. Her integrity demands she stay away from Alec, but her duty to her family tempts her to go with him. Integrity wins out for now, but we sense it's only a matter of time. The story becomes a race. Angel needs to forgive Tess and return before she surrenders. In fact, Angel is changing. His bad experiences in Brazil are altering his attitude. He is finally shedding his immaturity and growing to love Tess as a responsible adult. But the distance between them is still great. Ironically, their separation may have brought them closer, as Angel's loneliness has shown him how much Tess means to him. As Alec's courtship intensifies, so does the string of misfortunes plaguing Tess and her family. With her options narrowing, she becomes more desperate. Alec is portrayed as a sinister and threatening figure, even when supposedly in love with Tess. The supernatural Gothic atmosphere reappears at the D'Urberville Isle in the churchyard. Here, Tess, a real D'Urberville, and Alec, an impostor, have a solemn moment. Alec asserts he can do more for her than her dead ancestors. Tess begins to realize the futility of her aristocratic legacy. She begins to see that Alec may be her only hope. Phase the seventh, the fulfillment. Chapter 13, summary and analysis of chapters 53 through 59. Angel returns to his parents' home, haggard and gaunt from his time abroad. He reads Tess's angry letter and worries she will never forgive him. His mother haughtily declares that he shouldn't worry about a poor commoner, and Angel reveals Tess's exalted lineage. Angel spends a few days regaining his strength. He writes to Tess, but eventually receives a reply from her mother saying Tess is no longer with the family. Angel decides he must find her. He is encouraged by the revelation that Tess has not used any of the money he left for her. He realizes she must have suffered great poverty and is overcome with guilt. His parents finally guess the cause of their estrangement and feel more kindly toward their daughter-in-law. Just before Angel leaves, he receives the letter from Marion and Iz. Angel sets out to find his wife. He travels through Flintcomb Ash and Marlet, where he learns of John Durbeyfield's death. He finds the elaborate gravestone, and learning it is unpaid for, he settles the bill. When he meets Joan Durbeyfield, she is hesitant to tell him where Tess has gone. At last, she takes pity on him and reveals that Tess is in a place called Sandbourne. In Sandbourne, Angel can't find a Mrs. Clare or a Miss Durbeyfield, but he does learn that a D'Urberville is staying at an expensive lodging called the Herons. Angel hurries to the Herons and is impressed by its grandeur. He wonders how Tess could afford it. When Tess appears, she is dressed in expensive clothing. Angel pleads for her forgiveness and tells her he has learned to accept her as she is. Broken-hearted, Tess replies that it is too late. Thinking he would never come back, she gave in to Alec D'Urberville and is now under his protection. Tess leaves the room and Angel rushes out of the house. Mrs. Brooks, the landlady, follows Tess upstairs and spies on her through the keyhole. She sees Tess holding her head, accusing Alec of deceiving her. Alec replies angrily. Startled, Mrs. Brooks flees. A short while later, she notices a dark red spot spreading on the ceiling. Terrified, she has a workman open the door to the D'Urberville rooms. They discover Alec lying on the bed, stabbed to death. The landlady gives the alarm, and news of the murder spreads through the town. Angel decides to leave on the first train. As he walks to the next station, he sees Tess running after him. She tells him that she has killed Alec. She says she had to kill him because he wronged Angel, but she also had to return to Alec because Angel abandoned her. She begs for forgiveness. Angel, thinking she is delirious, tells her he loves her. At last, he realizes she is serious, though he still doesn't believe she has actually killed Alec. He agrees to protect her. They walk toward the interior of the country, hoping to escape overseas. They find an old, empty mansion and slip inside. After a woman comes to close up the house, Angel opens the shutters and they are alone for the night. 5 days pass and Angel and Tess slowly lapse back into their original love. One day, the woman who heirs the house discovers them and they decide it is time to leave. After a day of travel, they arrive at Stonehenge, where Tess feels quite at home. As she rests by a pillar, she asks Angel to look after her sister Liza Lou when she is dead. She says she hopes Angel will marry Liza Lou. She asks if he believes they will meet again after death. Angel does not answer, and Tess drifts into sleep. At dawn, Angel realizes they are surrounded. Men are moving in from all sides. Angel realizes Tess must truly have killed Alec. He asks the men not to take her until she wakes. When she sees them, she feels strangely relieved. She is glad she will not live because she feels unworthy of Angel's love. Sometime later, from a hillside outside the town of Wintoncester, Angel and Liza Lou watch as a black flag is raised above the prison tower. Tess has been put to death. Angel and Liza Lou are motionless for a time, and then they join hands and go on. This final phase brings the novel to a tragic close through a shift in perspective. It begins with a sense of mystery, as Hardy chooses not to narrate the climax of Tess's struggle, her return to Alec. The first part is told from Angel's perspective. When he arrives at the Herons, we have a sickening sense of what has happened, but he has no idea. He is too late. Tess's loyalty to her family has overmastered her integrity. Torn apart, she kills her lover in a murderous rage out of love for her husband. From that moment, the novel becomes a mechanical process leading to the inevitable conclusion: Tess's death. Tess recovers her love for Angel when she sees him again and feels guilty about how far she has drifted. Her fancy clothing and luxurious lodging physically measure how far into temptation she has gone. Her shame and grief cause her violent side to explode. Whether intentionally or not, she has fulfilled Angel's proclamation that they cannot be together as long as Alec is alive. The short section narrated from Mrs. Brooks's perspective is a clever technique. Just as Hardy excludes Tess's return to Alec, he excludes her murder of him. An unsuspecting third party reveals both events. By shifting attention away from Tess so suddenly, Hardy creates a sense that she is already lost. Though still alive, she has partially vanished into the gloom of her fate. Finally, despite the Gothic mystery and supernatural portents throughout the novel, Hardy still surprises us by setting the conclusion at Stonehenge, one of the most famous and mysterious monuments in the world. Now we will explore some of the most important quotations from the novel. The first quotation comes from the very beginning of the story, in Chapter 1. Parson Tringham has just stopped John Durbeyfield on the road. The parson says, "Don't you really know, Durbeyfield, that you are the lineal representative of the ancient and knightly family of the d'Urbervilles, who derive their descent from Sir Pagan d'Urberville, that renowned knight who came from Normandy with William the Conqueror, as appears by Battle Abbey roll?" John Durbeyfield replies, "Never heard it before, sir." This passage sets in motion the events that changed Tess's fate forever. The parson's tone is casual, as if he can't even imagine how this news might lead to tragedy. For him, it's just genealogical trivia. But for Durbeyfield, it feels like fate, the deepest truth about himself. The fact that this prophetic news is delivered on a road, in an open field, is reminiscent of the opening of Macbeth, where the witch's prophecy leads to disaster and death. Hardy emphasizes the irony of the situation. He contrasts the common peddler on the road with the image of the renowned knight who was his ancestor. He also contrasts their modes of address. The parson first calls him Sir John, but soon slips back into the more familiar Durbeyfield. Meanwhile, Durbeyfield, despite learning he is Sir John, still calls the parson Sir. These ironies multiply, making questions of class and identity complex and unstable, just as Hardy intends. Our second quotation is from Chapter 37. Angel Clare is sleepwalking on the third night of his estrangement from Tess. The narrator tells us, "Clare came close and bent over her. 'Dead, dead, dead,' he murmured. After looking at her for some moments with a gaze of unmeasurable woe, he bent lower, enclosed her in his arms, and rolled her in the sheet as in a shroud. Then, lifting her from the bed with as much respect as one would show to a dead body, he carried her across the room, murmuring, 'My poor, poor Tess, my dearest darling Tess, so sweet, so good, so true.'" The narrator continues, "The words of endearment, withheld so severely in his waking hours, were inexpressibly sweet to her forlorn and hungry heart. Thus she lay in absolute stillness, wondering what he was going to do with her. 'My wife, dead, dead,' he said." Angel's sleepwalking reveals his inner conflict. While consciously he maintains that Tess is bad and cannot be forgiven, his unconscious self reveals the tender love and moral respect he still feels for her. This foreshadows his final realization, which comes too late, that his condemnation of her was wrong. Angel's words, "dead, dead, dead," hint at Tess's future death, but they also signal his own conception of her. She is physically alive, but for him, she is morally dead as the idea of purity he once revered. The third quotation is from the end of Chapter 41. Tess, feeling like a hunted soul, has stumbled upon a group of wounded pheasants. The text says, "Under the trees several pheasants lay about, their rich plumage dabbled with blood. Some were dead, some feebly twitching a wing, all of them writhing in agony, except the fortunate ones whose tortures had ended during the night." With the impulse of a soul who could feel for kindred sufferers as much as for herself, Tess's first thought was to put the still living birds out of their torture, and to this end, with her own hands, she broke the necks of as many as she could find. "Poor darlings, to suppose myself the most miserable being on earth in the sight of such misery as yours," she exclaimed, her tears running down as she killed the birds tenderly. The dying birds symbolized Tess's own condition. They are silently suffering victims of gratuitous cruelty, which evokes Tess's quiet acceptance of her own violation by Alec. These flightless birds are in sharp contrast to the high-flying birds of romantic poetry. These birds have been shot down just as Tess has been. Tess's act of killing the suffering birds suggests she is killing off the part of herself that has quietly accepted years of agony. After this scene, she begins to show a more active resolution, which culminates in her murder of Alec. Her newfound activity may not save her. In fact, her punishment for the murder, hanging, will snap her neck just as she snaps the necks of the pheasants. Nevertheless, it may be preferable to her earlier passivity, providing her with a nobler way to face her fate. Our fourth quotation is from chapter 52. Tess and her family have sought shelter in their ancient clan's church. She has gone out walking at night and has come upon her family vault, where she finds Alec d'Urberville. The text describes the moment. As soon as she drew close to it, she discovered that the figure was a living person, and sank down nigh to fainting, not however till she had recognized Alec d'Urberville. He leapt off the slab and supported her. "I saw you come in," he said, smiling. "A family gathering, is it not, with these old fellows under us here? Listen." He stamped with his heel heavily on the floor, whereupon there arose a hollow echo from below. "That shook them a bit, I'll warrant," he continued. "The little finger of the sham d'Urberville can do more for you than the whole dynasty of the real underneath. Now command me, what shall I do?" Hardy's irony here is deep. The two main factors in Tess's sad fate, her d'Urberville ancestry and Alec himself, are brought together for her to see. It is ironic that Alec is at first mistaken for a sculpted ancestor, as if the distinction between the true and sham d'Urbervilles is not as important as it first seemed. When Alec stomps and a hollow echo is heard, we feel that those ancestors may be nothing more than an empty void. Alec believes he is different from them because he has power over Tess, but in fact he is just like them, using his power like a grand lord, although he is quite hollow. This scene shows how dead all thoughts of personal grandeur are next to the life of true feeling. Finally, the last quotation is the very last paragraph of the novel, from chapter 59. It reads, "Justice was done, and the president of the immortals, in Aeschylean phrase, had ended his sport with Tess, and the d'Urberville knights and dames slept on in their tombs unknowing. The two speechless gazers bent themselves down to the earth, as if in prayer, and remained there a long time, absolutely motionless. The flag continued to wave silently. As soon as they had strength, they arose, joined hands again, and went on." The tired and unimpassioned tone suggests the narrator's weariness with the ways of the world. Nothing great is achieved by this finale. The two figures of Lisalou and Angel went on, just as life itself will go on. Ignorance rules rather than understanding. The d'Urberville ancestors are unaffected by the agony and death of one of their own. Tess's tale has not been a climactic unfolding, but a rather humdrum affair that perhaps happens all the time. In this sense, there's great irony in Hardy's reference to the Greek tragedian Aeschylus. We feel tragedy should be more impassioned. In the Greek myth, Prometheus stole fire for the benefit of humans and was punished with eternal agony by the president of the gods. Aeschylus's view of that divine justice was ironic, just as Hardy's justice is placed in ironic quotation marks. Yet Tess's suffering, by contrast, seems to be simply a game or sport, as if nothing important is at stake. Hardy hints that Tess's life may have a mythical and tragic importance like that of Prometheus, but it is up to us to judge how ironic this justice is, or what her life's importance might be. Now, let's review some key facts about Tess of the d'Urbervilles. The author is Thomas Hardy. The work is a novel, and its genre is both Victorian and tragic. It was written in English in England during the 1880s and was first published in 1891. The narrator is anonymous and speaks in the third person, looking deep into the characters' minds with an objective but omniscient point of view. The tone is realistic and pessimistic. The story is set in the 1880s and 1890s in Wessex, a region in the southwest of England. The protagonist is Tess d'Urberville. The major conflict is that Tess is seduced, impregnated, and abandoned by Alec d'Urberville, which makes her unacceptable to her true love, Angel, later in life. The rising action includes Tess's family discovering their aristocratic roots, Tess accidentally killing the family horse, and her subsequent journey to the D'Urbervilles, where she is dishonored. The climax occurs when Tess's new husband, Angel, discovers her past and leaves her, going to Brazil. The falling action includes Tess's decision to go back to Alec, Angel's return, Tess's murder of Alec, and her short-lived escape before being apprehended and executed. The main themes are the injustice of existence, changing ideas of social class, and men dominating women. Motifs include birds, the Book of Genesis, and variant names. Symbols include the horse prince, the D'Urberville family vault, and Brazil. Foreshadowing is present throughout the novel. For example, Tess's killing of the pheasants foreshadows her own death by hanging. Alec's assertion that he will master Tess again foreshadows his re-emergence in her life. To conclude, here are some questions and topics for you to think about, inspired by the novel. First, discuss the character of Tess. To what extent is she a helpless victim? When is she strong and when is she weak? Tess often finds herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. She falls asleep while taking the beehives to market, which leads to Prince's death. She visits the D'Urbervilles out of guilt and a sense of responsibility. In trying to help her family, she loses sight of her own safety and becomes Alec's victim. However, she is also a strong woman. She stands up for herself, refuses to crumble, and moves on as a stronger person after the death of her child. Her determined attempts to escape her past reflect her strength. Next, think about the role of landscape in the novel. How do descriptions of place match the development of the story? The landscape always seems to inform the emotion of the event. The story opens on a beautiful day at the village dance. Many bad events occur in a dark forest. At Talbothays Dairy, the summer is full of budding love. When Tess goes to the farm at Flintcomb Ash, the rugged, depressing fields reflect the harshness of her life. Finally, consider how the novel critiques social principles. Hardy rarely questions public morality openly, yet the novel is a powerful critique of Victorian society. How does he achieve this? The novel uses a classical tragic plot. Tess's story has many features of Greek tragedy. The hero is noble and is punished on a far greater scale than their small sins warrant. Tess is high-born and honorable, and her momentary submission to Alec brings her far greater suffering than she deserves. Her execution feels like a great and noble sacrifice. But the higher power she is sacrificed to is not the gods, but Victorian social forces. It is the cult of aristocratic lineage, the unfair class system, and the myth of the pure virginal bride that bring undeserved suffering to Tess. The tragic structure of the story makes us feel indignation at the unfairness of Victorian society, without the need for any outright denunciations by the author. Here are a few more essay topics to consider. First, what is the role of fate in the story? What does Hardy mean by fate? To what extent does Tess's tragedy hinge on improbable coincidence? Second, throughout the story, a number of sources are presented as possible moral authorities. What are some of these sources? Which of them, if any, prevails? Third, discuss the character of Alec. Is he the villain of the novel? Does he really love Tess? How does he exemplify the novel's critique of the upper class? Fourth, Tess's story is full of omens. What are some of these omens? Are they an effective device? Do they build suspense, or are they simply heavy-handed foreshadowing? Fifth, social class and lineage are powerful forces. What role does Tess's noble lineage play in her character? Does the novel's portrayal of Tess advance some of the very social stereotypes it otherwise criticizes? Finally, Hardy's style has been both praised and criticized. How would you best characterize his writing style? What are some of its key characteristics? This concludes our audio adaptation of Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles. We hope you have found this journey through Wessex both moving and thought-provoking. This audio adaptation is based on the original book by Thomas Hardy. To support the author and his literary legacy, you can purchase the book through the Amazon link in the description. Thank you for listening.